Okay, hello everyone. Greetings to everybody and welcome to our third webinar. The first season of Smart Talks webinar, overview of smart metering standards in EU, had to tackle the challenges of different standards in European states. The conclusion was that the universal standard is very much needed in the field of smart metering and smart cities to achieve mass implementation in the EU market. The second season of the Smart Talks webinar, Useful Advice for a Massive Rollout, was devoted to the idea of helping small and medium utilities with the process of rollouts. In the webinar, we brought the unique insights into the questions utilities might run into during a massive rollout and gave useful advice on how to achieve almost 100% coverage, how to choose telecommunication technology, and emphasizes the importance of standardization and certification. What is the next step of smart metering? By seeing the mass implementation of smart meters across Europe, we can notice several obstacles to further development. In this webinar, we will discuss what has already been done to make the best use of smart metering and try to suggest solutions that will bring us closer to the implementation of smart cities. So please welcome our guest, Mr. Roberto Zangrandi, Secretary General of the ETSO, Mr. Thomas Ljobet, Managing Director of ESMIC, and Mr. Sergio Lazzarotto, President and Executive Director of the LMS User Association. Thank you for joining us today. I will now start with question for our guest. And also I would like to encourage the audience to ask questions during the webinar in the chat section of the Zoom. So we can start with the first question. What do you think, could we achieve device compatibility in smart cities worldwide and how? Sergio, you have very important experience in standardization in the PC industry, and LMS is putting a lot of effort into achieving compatibility. So you are very qualified to discuss about this issue, and please give us your opinion first.
Okay, thank you, Jovan. Hello, everybody. Before I expand a little bit further on this topic, I would like to make a small precision, which is that when we talk about our world, first we need to make sure that we understand what we are talking about. And here we are talking about strategic infrastructures. We're talking about water, we're talking about gas, we're talking about electricity, we're talking about heat. Smart city, as it defines in terms of market, it is a much larger than the strategic infrastructure, and as such, it is not the full domain of DLMS activities. So DLMS is really about strategic infrastructures, which are the essential part of the smart city, because it is the blood of smart city. And without electricity, without gas, without water, the smart city is dying. And this is really the world into which DLMS is focusing. Now, as we speak about compatibility, here as well, we need to make two differences. When we talk about communication compatibility and when we talk about application compatibility, because often we are mixing up the standardization between the standardization of the telecommunication protocol and the standardization of the data application protocol. And these two things, sometimes they are mixed up together. If you take examples of some telecommunication protocol, which are integrating as well an upper layer, which is the application part, some other telecommunication protocol are not integrating this application part. And therefore, what is extremely important is to understand that when you are in applications as such, where we are standardizing, thinking that you can achieve the full implementation by relying only into or one telecommunication protocol, it has been proven, and we have several examples that it will not work. So basically, our deployment is an aggregation of different types of communication protocols. Therefore, when we speak about compatibility can only be achieved within one unique communication protocol. And then if you have to go from one communication protocol to another communication protocol, then the compatibility that has to be granted through the data application that applies at a higher level. And therefore, at this level, what DLMS is doing is going into the next step of standardization. Until today, we have been standardizing the DLMS COSM protocol, which is the generic standard for the application protocol. But what we are doing now, we are coming into the market through the activities that are undertaken in various working groups, which are specific to very vertical application. We are basically standardizing the way how we are recommending our protocol should be implemented for a given device within a given application. As an example, we are going to have electricity smart meter generic companion profile, or water smart meter generic companion profile, or electrical vehicle charging station generic companion profile. Achieving this, what does it mean? It means that if you do have, as an example, the electrical vehicle charging station profile that sits into the EV charger, and you have the same profile that sits into the smart meter on top of the electricity smart meter profile. As you are connecting the EV charger, then the EV charger is plug and play. What does it mean? That within the same communication technology or connectivity in between those two devices, no matter who is the manufacturer of one or the other of the device, then the devices are interchangeable. It means that really you plug them and they should work. This is really the degree of compatibility that we should achieve. Of course, then the question comes, what about if you have to share data with other ecosystems that do have other protocol at the level of the application layer? And then here, what you have to do, you have to guarantee this bridge by doing the appropriate data mapping. And this is exactly what the DLMS is doing.
Okay, Sergio, thank you. Roberto.
Yes.
Please, if you can add your opinion on this issue.
Yes, absolutely. It's very interesting what Sergio just depicted, and the word that he used is the reference word that I believe will be forcefully the mandate for all developers and all operators alike. So it is plug and play. Plug and play implies obviously a lot of upfront agreements and upfront technical bargaining and negotiations among the suppliers and the original equipment manufacturers in our industry. We have seen progressively an availability of the manufacturers to go towards that direction, because the easier, the simpler, the more let's say usable framework are offered, the wider the market will be. If we just limit this to the smart meter, we cannot leave on a side anyway the fact that the flexibility and the role of the active consumers must also be taken into account, and that will be, as far as the meters are concerned, one of the most important variables in the near future. There are repeated rollouts of smart meters of different of different generations, and there is not an alignment on the capabilities of the meters altogether, all the same in every country of Europe. So we shall have to cope for a certain number of years with different availability of data coming from a meter beyond the basic data that a meter can provide as far as measuring is concerned. So this is one of the difficulties that I see, and the other difficulty will be probably to bring together the quality and the quantity and the packages of offers and services that will be available in the distribution networks, and have a suitable approach that can render on one side plug and play, and on the other side interoperable the different products that in that offer are going to play a role of measurement or support to the flexibility that is requested. So I think that, for instance, a view from our side that the role of an association, also considering the restrictions that might come from the legislative framework, not allowing agreements and cooperation beyond a definite framework. Otherwise, you can think of having secondary agreement of a commercial nature rather than technological nature. So staying within the boundaries of the antitrust and cartel disposition, I think that the big role of the operators will be really to sit around the table with the manufacturers and depict not what is needed now, but what is going to be needed in the next 15 years, so to say. So, and have a great inventory of the number of devices and localization of the devices that are going to be replaced in the next 15 years, and have a detailed mapping of the different rollout of the successive generations of smart meters. These are the difficulties as far as the field-related view of smart metering is concerned. And then, of course, the separation that Sergio made between telecommunication on one side and the let's say intrinsic value of metering on the other side, that implies another series of communication protocol, is extremely important. And I think that in this respect, we should be able to reach a common high standard as far as the communications are concerned, and in an interoperable way, have the possibility to connect that standard to various form of telecommunication. And that is, in my opinion, one of the big challenges that we have.
Okay, thank you, Roberto. Thomas.
So probably I was not extremely clear, but these are the two loopholes that we should overcome in order to progress. Because managing the existing is not so difficult, because everybody does it. But the point in transiting in the current legislative framework and regulatory framework to the next 15 years, that can be pretty much imagined.
Okay, thank you. Thomas,
Thank you, Jovan. I'll be a bit shorter on this one. There's not so much for me to add to what Sergio and Roberto have said. Maybe start a little bit what you're asking also about smart cities, and I think we'll be talking about smart cities quite a lot today. And in your question is also the idea of device compatibility. I like what Sergio said a little bit, that we have interoperability and then we have compatibility that goes beyond interoperability. So this is another step. I think we're still also a little bit at the point that we need to reach interoperability. So this is maybe something to add here. But yeah, since we're going to talk a lot about smart cities today, I think one thing that is important is, of course, what actually is a smart city. And while I'm going to keep close a little bit to the definition that the Commission also has, that it's basically a place where everything that's traditional networks, infrastructures are made more efficient, resilient, thanks to the use of digital solutions. But ultimately, this is, of course, for the benefit of, first, it's system efficiency, but it's also for the benefit of the businesses and the citizens, the consumers, ultimately. So that's I think also an important starting point. And I think this is also something I'll get back to in what I will say later, maybe also about data access, data use, sharing. Should it be charged? All these questions. I think it's an important point to get back to. So this is the idea. Maybe to start with what a smart city is, and of course, I mean, we can also go beyond city limits. We like now the concept of the smart regions and smart communities and so on. But so, of course, in the end of the day, it's a lot about, of course, starting with the grids, with the infrastructure, and nobody will be surprised, and we've mentioned it here today, that of course we need also full deployment of smart meters. If we look at where we are in Europe today, I mean, we were supposed to have 80% deployment of smart meters for electricity in 2020. We'll probably not reach it by end of 24, beginning of 25. With gas meters, will be probably between 40-45% by 2025. So, I mean, I think that also when we look at the different stages, we also really need to modernize the grids. And Roberto, I think he has some fascinating figures also on the needs for investments and everything that's needed actually to get there, let's say in a 2030 horizon. But we also need to deploy the hardware. We need to get we need to roll out the meters. This is the kind of very, very first stage. But unfortunately, except some countries in Europe that have done a probably good job there, like Spain, Italy, but also Finland, some of the Baltics and others, but we're not there yet. So yeah, so good to get back to the question where I think it's very interesting what Sergio said, interoperability, and then you have even additionally, you have, you go further, you have compatibility. But at ESMIC, sort of, we have this multi-utility metering approach. So there are, of course, different silos, although I don't like to think in silos in the first place. We should also not think in silos here, but we have electricity, heat, gas, water meters. And in the end, all this needs to work together to reach interoperability. So we need to make sure that these different meters, these different silos also can work together. And in a way, what we need, that this is at least a bit the position as we have it, is that we need the same standard for the interface. To make sure basically everything can connect and speak together, can speak the same language like in real life. Otherwise, you don't achieve anything, and you have no communication. And so in the end of the day, these different devices need to be able to work together to be interoperable. And this is the very basis actually for a smart city and for the communities then to thrive and for all the benefits to be reaped. Of course, the characteristics and implications of meters are different for electricity, gas, heat, water. I mean, I think this is also something Roberto said before. When we look at electricity meters, I think there's of course one element which is about system costs, system efficiency, but they also play a key role, or can play, or should play a key role in empowering consumers, and ultimately also enable demand side flexibility. If you look at gas meters, it's not the same. If you look at water meters, it's also not the same. Water meters are probably much more actually focused on system efficiency, on leak detection, they have, so to say, also different functions. But in the end, all these devices need to need to work together.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. We can continue with next maybe similar question. What organizations should collaborate in order to accomplish forward-thinking legislation and regulation in the smart cities field? Roberto, I think that you tackled this question and maybe you can continue.
Yes, and I do qualify as the most passionate fan of the national regulatory authorities, as you know, which is true. I'm sometimes extremely critical of the procedure of the national regulatory authorities, but they play a central role, and it is not a case that they have been invented for. The only pity is that they have 27 in Europe. And that is going to make things even more difficult by the day, by the way. What Thomas was mentioning is extremely important because what is a smart city? A smart city is not just energy, as he said, but just to think of the European water crisis of these weeks in several countries. Think of the gas limitation and probably the gas limits that will be imposed even to household consumption for heating and cooking next winter if the market continues to develop with this trend, and the politics around it also follow. So what is a smart city is probably a system of interoperable devices that allocate the best amount of resources where those resources are needed and take care to manage it in order to prevent or to limit to the maximum the stress to the different grids of distribution of different commodities for the citizens. And this is a big responsibility that all distributors are going to have. And this, in my opinion, will be one of the reasons to bring really on the same page the different system distributors that are operating in big urban areas and around them, because we still question many times about the specificity of those distribution system operators that manage either electricity or gas or both or things like that. But it's not enough. We must reach a standard of interoperability also with the water system, with the district heating, etc., etc. Is not just in cross-sectoral or intersectoral integration of the different sources of energy. It's really their management and the ability to shift from one to another according to the development of the market. So this is probably what is in front of the collective work of the system operators. As EDSO, I questioned myself very much if it was legitimate that we handled just with electricity. Of course, the framework where we move requires that we specialize, and the structure of my membership requires that we specialize in electricity. But we should not lose sight of the other system operators, and we should move one step forward and advance in, let's say, just confronting initially what are the different approaches, but then we should reach a common way to tackle problems. If you go to to specialize the fairs or events. Take Enlit, the former utility week. You see electronic or smart metering of electricity, gas, water, and other possible forms of measurable vectors of energy or product of energy. Well, that is exactly what I'm referring to, and we need for that more than a specific regulatory approach, probably a better and a much more open mind. And that's it. And that is, Thomas, in the fancy numbers about the investments until 2030 you were referring to. And I just recall that I'm an evangelist of the fact that the distribution system operators will have to invest up to 425 million in the next year to reach an acceptable degree of modernization of their grids. In the current situation, with the crisis that we know in terms of energy, supply chain, etc., probably that figure is very much optimistic.
Okay, maybe Thomas, you can continue then.
Yeah, and I promise this time to be really a little shorter. Also in the interest of time. It's not my specialty, but I will try. So no, I think what Roberto has said, that we need more of a system approach. We need to look at the whole picture. Of course, DSOs, I can say that. Roberto can say that certainly too. But DSOs, of course, if you look at the smart city, if you look at the energy side, it's key. It's also key if you look at, I mean, also at the digitalization in energy, if you look at the integration of renewables, if you look at all these aspects, of course, DSOs are key. But your question is a little bit which organizations need to work together in a way to achieve this forward-looking legislation regulation for smart cities. So, I mean, first of all, I think that every organization which is part of an ecosystem needs to be able to work together with everyone else. Then, of course, every organization will have their interests, and you may be aligned in your interests more with some than with others. But I think if we look at the bigger picture here, this needs to be possible. And of course, I mean, here I think we have three organizations here that have also a bit different characteristics, different nature. But I think, I mean, from SMIC's perspective, we consider both EDSO and DLMS among our closest partners. And I think it's also important that we, in the same ecosystem, we work together and we push. Of course, ultimately, it's not us. We have to then also make sure that legislators and regulators also do implement. Especially, I think it's also about implementation very much with a bit more speed. I think one of the big problems we have in Europe, this is not the case everywhere else around the world. In other parts of the world, there are other issues, but one of the big issues we have here in Europe is often the lack of speed with which things are done. So we have everything takes forever for sometimes good reasons, because we have also democratic societies, and particularly in Europe, we may not be world champions in everything, but we're certainly world champions when it comes to finding consensus. And to find consensus, you also need time. But this is, of course, often to the detriment of the speed with which you need to adopt, and how it's also necessary to accelerate things where we're not very good in Europe in general. But I mean, when I can give you an example also on the cooperation between stakeholders also at EU level together with institutions, because I think that's one of the good things here, and everyone who's been for a long time in Brussels, and some of you have been in Brussels for so much longer than me, but knows that in the end, it's about working hand in hand with other stakeholders, but also with the institutions. And I mean, a good example is maybe also the work, for example, in the Smart Grids Task Force, where SMIC has been active, but also the DSOs, where stakeholders work together hand in hand with the Commission. There are several expert groups on interoperability, on cybersecurity, on consumer flexibility. I think these are the three main ones. And you have basically everyone around the table. Everyone has, of course, their different interests. And it takes years of discussions, but in the end, there's an outcome. There's a recommendation that is adopted by everyone. And then there's an implementing act. And then, of course, this needs to happen, and things need to be then also transposed and implemented so that we can move forward.
Okay. Sergio, please give us your opinion on this issue.
Concerning the capability of having all things happening, what is lacking today, and we are working on it with other organizations, it is to make sure that things are running in parallel. Often what we have seen in the past, it is that either you have legislation that is defining the legislative framework, after you have the industry that is aggregating players together to establish the standardization body, and then after you have the standardization body. So if it takes several years for the legislation, if it takes another several years of this standardization, by the time when you have standardized device hitting the market, it's about 10 years, 15 years, and this doesn't work. It's not possible. So the standardization have to run in parallel with the legislation. And these two things got to work together. At the same time, the industry lobby or the entities that are representing a given industry as well should be part of this game as well. And all three needs to work in parallel. Therefore, if we are at a given point capable of having, let's say, the basic standardization, that is the one that is recommended or will be recommended to the legislative body to be voted, even though the vote afterwards, it might take maybe 2-3 years to get voted. In the meantime, the manufacturer can develop standardized product, get to the market. And at the time when you have the legislation being voted, you have product on the market that are maybe not 100%, but up to 90%, 95% corresponding to what the legislation has been adopting. And this is really what is important, is these parallel tracks have to be managed together by having all those entities working hands in hands, where the manufacturer with the standardization body can, in a most appropriate way, come with proposals to the legislative bodies, and the legislative bodies adopt those proposals afterwards to translate them into the legislative framework. And I think that this is actually very important. We have a good example. We are currently working with ESMIG and also with WELMEC in order to basically make a proposal to the European Commission to change one of the legislative frame that is related specifically to remote display for meteorologically relevant data. And the fact that we are working together, the manufacturer with the standardization body and also with ESMIG, we have made the proposal to the European Commission. And for me, this is the right way of working, where everybody are working within the same line, within the same objective at the same time, not one after the other one. Because otherwise, the risk we are taking is that you have the legislative body that are making some decisions, and when it goes down to the manufacturers and the standardization body, we see that there are some decisions which have been made that could have been made differently if the legislative body would have had at the right time the right input from the industry. And this is extremely important.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. Okay, we have today on this webinar 3 organizations. One is a representative of utilities, the other is a representative of industry, and third organization is a representative standardization body. So I think that we can hope that in the future that these 3 organizations will work together, and in parallel standardization and regulation on the way you explained, and maybe we'll have more compatibility in this area. And after this question about organization. One question about companies. Is it necessary to involve telecommunication companies and home energy management system manufacturers much more for the further development of smart cities? Thomas, you have worked with the various European and world associations and companies for more than 20 years. With this experience, what can you say about this question?
Yes, I mean, definitely. I mean, whether it's necessary to involve them more, I mean, definitely yes. I mean, everyone needs to be involved, and everyone who plays a role in developing smart solutions, smart energy solutions, everything that you need in the smart city, which is not only energy, is needed. Without communication services, there obviously no smart city. So I think that's clear. So to involve them more. I mean, also in our own membership, we have innovative communication solution providers that are focusing on communication aspects also within the energy or particularly smart metering ecosystem. I mean, for the bigger telcos, they're also looking at that, but often, I mean, if you look also particularly at the energy space, it's a smaller part of their business because, of course, these are large companies with large portfolios, and even in the IoT space, sometimes I feel that energy is it's not on the very top of everyone's agenda. But yeah, Sergio, who knows this industry so much better and has experience, I'm sure he will also provide us some more insights here. Also, what Sergio, what you just said, I think is important to get back to. With the previous question, you put this much clearer and much more in a much more graphic way, almost. The problem with speed, the problem with processes not running in parallel. Often, I think what we have in Europe is legislation in the rear view mirror. So we have basically technology which is advancing much faster. And I think also the example that you mentioned with the MID, with the Measurement Instruments Directive, I think this is a case in point, of course. But yeah, I mean, on the second part of your question, I mean, the home energy management system, HEMS, I mean, this is, of course, very important in many ways. I mean, at least and this is also very important for us at ESMIC, from a consumer perspective, it's also home energy management system that can bring smart metering also to life. That doesn't mean that smart metering is not there and doesn't fulfill its function, but I think also to get the consumers on board, this is something that can help and can also really leverage smart metering. And I mean, we can say, I mean, in the UK, for example, smart meters came with home displays, and in many ways, this is a better offering than what happened in the rest of Europe on the continent, where this was not the case, because it's also a way for consumers to see the benefits of smart meters, to have a relation also with the meter, to see what's happening there. This is not a reality yet in most of Europe, and I believe this is important. And yes, definitely, home energy management systems can leverage definitely on the value of smart meters.
Okay, Sergio, please continue with your opinion.
Yeah. So concerning telecommunication, well, for DLMS is not a topic, because DLMS protocol has the advantage of being telecommunication technology or protocol agnostic. But thanks to the fact that we are telecommunication protocol and technology agnostic, the advantage is that we are establishing liaison with the major telecommunication standardization bodies, and for each telecommunication technology and or protocol, we are developing specific profiles. So more recently, just to cite only a few of them, we have been signing a liaison with Wyson, we have been signing a liaison with LoRa, we have been signing a liaison with G3 PLC. Now that goes into the hybrid world as well. So we are signing liaison with all those telecommunication standardization organization, and we are supporting their communication technology, on top of which our protocol is going to be transported. And when we are certifying devices, we are not only certifying devices at the level of the data that are standardized by DLMS, but we are certifying the devices in their natural declared telecommunication technology, which means that, as an example, if we are certifying a device over Wi-SUN, it will be effectively certified by using Wi-SUN connectivity, and we will certify, of course, not the telecommunication part, because for this we are going to use golden devices accredited by the telecommunication organization, but we will certify our protocol, our data and the implementation of DLMS COSM over the declared transport layer. And so this is something that we're used to, is something that we are doing, and we will continue, because the telecommunication ecosystem over time will evolve, and the technologies which are the winning today might not be the winning tomorrow anymore. So we need absolutely to have this flexibility of adaptation of our standards on top of today, but also tomorrow technologies, communication technologies that are hitting the market. This is why being agnostic to telecommunication technology is extremely important. And whenever it makes sense, whenever there is a good communication technology hitting the market, and there is the demand from the market to provide a solution, we will develop the specific profile to enable the use and the transport of DLMS COSM data on top of any future as well communication technologies.
Okay, Sergio, thank you. Roberto, do you have to add something on this issue?
Well, not so specific as Sergio, obviously, but the answer is yes. The answer is yes. We do not. We are still reasoning as the DSOs, the regulatory authorities, the standardization bodies, and the manufacturers. We are reasoning on a quote unquote current scenario. We do not dare to take long shots, and I think that the time has come to also envisage the possibility to take long shots and really try to imagine what is going to be in a few years. And I'm talking really to the industry on one side and to the standardization authorities on the other side. What are the standards of the future? Can we imagine a sandbox for technology rather than only for regulatory aspects that allows us to experiment and depict, as the Latin would say, in corpore vili, in the flesh of the system, what is exactly going to happen? What is imaginable to see as a development in a smart city or in a smart system altogether? Because I am reluctant in limiting the smartness to the cities, because we need the smart grids, we need the smart communication, we need the smart devices, and probably also smart standardization somewhere down the road. And that is really what I would like to hear. I'm fascinated by the multiplicity of the protocols that Sergio was listing, and but my automatic question was, how come so many? So how come so many? So are we chasing the offer from the providers, or should we instead state expectation and challenge the system in order to provide the long shot and the long imaginative way to manage in the future? Because the constraints we know that it must be efficient, It must be economical, and it must be easy to implement at system level and at the private level. So, but I'm talking, feeling also the responsibility of living in a complex system and doing too little to render the complex system simpler.
Okay, when we mention home energy management system, Roberto, maybe you can continue and give us the answer on the question. Do you believe that it is necessary to introduce special home device that will make it easier for the prosumer to use the new technologies in further development of the smart city?
Well, I think that the prosumers will need a simple life, and being used to these devices and the multiple applications need a similar approach in the management of their smart houses and their smart energy related life, probably. And so the answer is yes, Jovan. The point is to see how much the average consumer might be interested in digging or taking deep dives into his own energy management. Probably they will be looking for applications that depending on their profile do that in their place, and probably that would be one of the most simple and preliminary solutions. I do not see also with an array of applications, let's say, imagine to simplify the life of a consumer, any household become an expert of energy, every family developing an energy manager within the family and the household. But certainly people are more sensible and have realized in the past months that the electricity has got a cost that we could remember in countries in Southern Europe, for instance, dating back to the 60s. So when the children were urged to switch off, and when you have bills raising from 85 to 198 per month, you start switching off. And I see that, we see that in beginning and taking quite a pace in the profile of the private consumption. But yes, that there will be the need to support them to render the use of energy much more rational. And there will be also, from the point of view of the retailers, the request of an effort of imagination and to structure the offer to the private consumer is in such a way that the dynamics of a family can be most followed. So now the offer of tariffs is very much framed in time and quantity. I believe that the consumer needs more flexibility and the possibility to navigate between the different forms of flexibility to accommodate his or her a real need of energy in a specific moment. But people are available for that. Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you, Roberto. Thomas, please give us your opinion.
So yeah, your question is on the home device, right? I mean, there I'm with Roberto. Of course, I mean, the home device, I mentioned it before as an example of what had been done in the UK. I mean, for us, one thing that's important is also technology acceptance. We have seen also that this is an issue, at least in Europe, sometimes. So if the important thing is not the home device, the important thing is that the consumer can see the benefits the technology has for him or her. This is the most important thing. Whether it's that you have, you know, a device really installed at home, whether you have an app and so on, this is maybe not so important. And again, also what Roberto said, I'm fully with you there. Huh? We all have limited time. We will not sit in the evening on the sofa and try to optimize everything. We want to have that automated, and we want the washing machine to switch on when energy is cheap at night, the load is in. The same with our car in the garage, and so on and so forth. So these things need to happen. And then, of course, there's also a bit the question how to manage peaks, and there's a lot we can do. And this is, Roberto, something that's of course also very close to your heart. But this is key. I mean, this is important. In the end of the day, the consumer needs to see the benefits. From my view, actually, this has not yet sufficiently happened, at least in Europe, that the consumer has seen the direct benefit of the smart meter. So this is something that we need to work on. This is also something that we need to campaign on. I think also the cost benefit analysis very much made also on system efficiency. If you also look at the different parts that were analyzed, it was basically all on capex, opex. This is good, and still, I mean, we had the positive cost benefit analysis. We have basically a gain of, I mean, we have efficiency gains of anywhere between 2 and 10%. What we have with every installed meter point, but we have also, if we look at it, I mean, we have something like 80-90 euro basically net benefit with every metering point. And then we're just looking at system efficiency. We're not yet looking actually at the impact this can have really in terms of savings. And we have today something that's quite unprecedented. We probably would not have discussed this just 1 year ago. We have a dual crisis today in Europe. One is an energy price crisis. The other is an energy security of supply crisis. These are two things that were not that high on the agenda for a very long time in Europe. I mean, also when we looked at the clean energy package just a couple of years ago, the big question was how can you make actually investments in energy attractive when wholesale prices are on average around 30 euro. So that is something where we are a very different situation now. And I think we have an industry here, we have an ecosystem here, which can make a real difference. This is also, in my view, what is a bit lacking in the Repower EU plan, is that we look at the smart everything. Of course, it's great. You need to fuel switch, you need to replace fossils, you need to accelerate renewables, you have to modernize the grids, all that. But you also have a very powerful device which can help the consumer to ease the bills, to reduce costs. So I think this is important. And in the end, also, I think if we look at the whole picture, I mean, in a way, consumer-prosumer is at the center of the energy system. This is the way we see it in Europe now. It's a consumer-centric system. I think also the smart city, the consumer should be, in the end of the day, a citizen at the center of it. I mean, this is at least the way we look at the things in Europe, where everything is, well, like it or not, but whether everything is very much, and I think it's good, about consumer empowerment and about consumers becoming active stakeholders. So they need to give consent, but everything is there. The technology is ripe, is mature. It's been for a very long time. It just needs to be put on the ground. It needs to be deployed, and everything that you can do with the technology needs to happen. It's a bit like, like the TV. It's not of good use if you don't push the on button and watch a film. So everything is there, but we just need to use it to its full potential.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. And because we are limited with time, Sergio, if you agree, I will ask the last question, and then you can give your answer on this and that last question. Do you agree that having access to meter data would contribute to the development of smart cities? What benefits would users get from it? And in that case, do you think that data hub should be a separate entity and should it charge for access to the data?
That's your favorite topic, and
That for me?
yes,
Yes.
it's
Okay. Okay. So smart meter contains a lot of data, and smart meter of tomorrow will contain even more data. Now, all those data today are produced and used into the regulated world, which means that DSO, these guys have access to those data. Are those data going to be useful, available, and in which way, in which form, and for what? To the consumer world that at a given point might be interested on using those data to provide added value services to the consumer? The answer is yes. Yes. But here you're going to face several issues. The first one is that the confidentiality of the data. Making data available to the consumer world, if you put at risk the privacy of the data, it is not an option. The second point, the more data you make available, the more devices or applications are going to use those data, the higher the security risk is going to be to expose the strategic infrastructure to the external world, which is the consumer world. And we all know that the consumer world is not as much secured as the regulated world. Therefore, exposing those data, yes, we have to, but we need to understand how, to whom, for what. And clearly, this is where there is a huge play in terms of standardization. And this is exactly what DLMS has been starting to work on it, where we want to guarantee that the devices that may potentially use those data will be commissioned and decommissioned devices, will not potentially breach the security of the strategic infrastructure. If they are using another protocol, we will provide the data according to a given data mapping so that the data we are providing to them are formatted in the way they will be able to use them. So all these kind of activities is a kind of pre-processing that will have to be performed in the island of security where today we are. And then there is another aspect, which is that the some of those data have value, but not to be brought far away in the cloud minutes after when those data are asked for, because these data, the value of those data is if you can process them immediately and not after 5 minutes or after 10 minutes. And this comes another question: how can you open up those data so that people can use them, but can use them at the moment when they have to use them? And this brings another aspect, which is the edge computing, where we need to provide data for the edge computing. And for that, you need to have standardized APIs so that you are standardizing how those data are accessed in a very secured way, and with, again, device commissioning and decommissioning, so that people can leverage the value of accessing those data to do some intelligent applications running locally and take advantage of value, offering in fine to the consumer the added value and the digital convenience that the consumer is looking for. But all this under the control of the consumer, because in fine, is the consumer that is deciding whether they want to open up the data access or not. And clearly here, all this needs to be managed together so that we are offering solutions for those who need immediate data, maybe at a later stage data in the cloud, or for edge computing through ad hoc APIs, and as well with pre-formatted data, whatever the protocol on the consumer side is going to be.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. Roberto, do you have time?
Well, a very telegraphic reply here, because I must run after 3 o'clock sharp, which is now. I fully agree with Sergio Lazzarotto on the approach. I think that the clearer any provision about the use of consumption data will be taken, the better will be for the market, for the customer, and for the user of those data. There is something that is terrifying me as a citizen, even more than the privacy aspects that are related to the data, are the use that the data might stimulate in providing financial hybrid products around my consumption data and those of my household and neighbors. And this is there. This is just around the corner. The fact that the more your consumption data are available and analyzed, the more you will receive extremely personalized offers in terms of offer of energy, and the price could be even related to some kind of personalized future of the cost of energy, which can be, let's say, drawn on your personal profile of consumptions and use of the energy. That is what really terrifies me. So we should go on the technical side to favor flexibility, to favor peak shaving, to favor the stability of the network, etc., etc., etc. Perfect. Must be clear, must be well defined, must be well agreed, and must be well regulated. All the rest that may intrude heavily in my relation with my retailers and with my DSOs, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. And I must say that the consumer organizations are neglecting this aspect, and it would be high time that they come and analyze better what might be the impact of the use of beyond the meter data and data stemming from the meters used for commercial purposes, and profiling the prices for the consumer.
Okay, thank you, Roberto. Thank you for your time. And Thomas.
Yeah, time is up. I just I think the way Sergio put it was very accurate. I think here, I mean, this is also to what I said before. What the consumer needs to get, whether this is through a home device or not, is access to real-time data. This is in the legislation. It's just not implemented. Same thing with demand-side flexibility. It's in the legislation since 3 years or more. Clean energy package. It's implemented, I think, more or less in 4 countries in Europe. And they're still working on it. So it's in that sense, this is a bit an issue here. Of course, data is a sticky issue. I think we could speak another hour on that. I mean, we have a core principle at ESMIC, at least, where we advocate for the access to energy data in a non-discriminatory way for all authorized energy market participants. And we need clear rules, of course, to define which market participants should access which data, because energy data does not equal energy data. But when we talk about consumption data, then of course, in the end of the day, this is something the consumer cannot be charged. This is also in the European legislation now. The consumer can, of course, never be charged for the data he or she generates. So that's important, of course. So consumers should get energy consumption data for free. They already pay in a way for collecting the metering data. So they cannot be charged for this again. Then the question is, of course, also on demand, they should probably get the data also from their suppliers. But yeah, it gets very complicated because we also understand, and Roberto said that, I mean, nothing comes for free. And also, of course, the data needs to be anonymized, it needs to be processed. So we need also a way to compensate these costs. But I think this is also something that can be done through the tariffs, right, Roberto?
And you must know where you stand in the algorithm. That is important. That is important. You may be anonymized, but you must know where is your place in the algorithm, because that is the ignition of improper use of your personal data.
Okay. Thomas, it is okay. We can.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So we can finish. Okay. Thank you very much. I think that we have very interesting discussion today. Very short conclusion. What are the next steps? Maybe we can highlight multi-utility and home energy management systems. Thanks, Roberto. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Sergio. Thank you to the audience. Let's shape the future together, and so see you in some next season. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh, Jovan, thank you, and bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.